let's get into politics. You are the artsy Marxist, and what got you into politics initially? And then we'll slowly go down the radicalization hole. But what kind of got you interested initially? And where did you start initially, like on the spectrum?
Yeah, well, that's a tough question because it kind of depends on how far back you want to go. But
As far back as you want.
I'm gonna
I,
say,
I want the beginning, but you can start where you want.
yeah, I mean, it's been, I've always been the sort that push back against authority in terms of like what the status quo was that I was being taught. I knew for a fact that when I was being told by my teachers that I wasn't allowed to draw to pay attention, that there was something wrong, and I resisted them. And that's part of why I am who I am today. But it was not easy. I had teachers literally bring me to tears multiple times as just like a kid this high. Because I was trying to cope with being on the spectrum and having no treatment for that and trying to get through school. So I was raised in a conservative home, a very conservative home. Um,
Really?
yeah, my
But
parents.
everybody was artists?
Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
I mean,
I wouldn't have guessed that, but I guess all right, interesting.
yeah, I mean, it's not that they were like they're farmers, you know. My
Okay.
grandparents were Norwegian immigrants who came over because they couldn't find any work. My grandpa was a minister and an artist, and he couldn't find any work and had many children to support. So they came to the United States looking for opportunities, and they did find some here. But these were all very rural locations where he was living. My grandparents were living in like rural Minnesota, rural Montana, South Dakota. So, not a lot of exposure to different types of people. And then the other side of my family also lived in a very rural location. So, it's just a bit different. And um, I was raised both in that sphere because I was taken to the farm every single weekend, pretty much, or every other weekend. So I was exposed to that and farming and that sort of community. But then I grew up in the city, so I had these two experiences to like compare and contrast. And I think that definitely affected sort of my thinking. I was like, why is there such a difference between what my parents are saying and my experiences? And I had to really question that. And that first took the form of me questioning the strict form of Christianity that my parents were teaching to me. I was the first one in my family, to my knowledge, to refuse to be confirmed. And
What
then
what what branch of Christianity was it?
my, let me see here. My mom's side is all Lutheran, but very, very strict Lutheranism. And then the other side is Catholic. But my dad did convert to Lutheranism when he met my mom. So, yeah,
So that in some ways those are like kind of opposite a little bit.
in some ways, but
Be-
there's,
because Luther, like Martin Luther, was all, "Hey, I don't think the Pope is infallible," and they were like, "No, he is." And then Martin Luther's like, "Well, here's the thing I wrote that says that that's not the case, and here's some other stuff I'm pissed off about." And they were like, "No, unacceptable." And so he went off and did his own thing.
yeah, I mean, that's definitely true. So I don't really, they seemed very similar to me in a lot of ways, though, in terms of like the form of Lutheranism. I know that there's more like liberal, or I don't even know what you would call it, like less strict forms of Lutheranism.
Right.
It seems like in my family, because my grandpa was a minister, I mean, it was very strict, and a lot of the same sort of rules centering around conservatism and limiting the rights of women and things like that still applied.
Oh yeah, yeah. They're gonna marry each other there. Yeah, no, that's true. It's just interesting in like one family, like that's a divide because that was like a really big like he branched off. I mean, I was raised Catholic, so some of this stuff is still floating around in my long term memory. As much as I've tried to forget all of the dogma, but it's like it's still kind of floating around there. But yeah. So
Mhm.
you didn't. How did you? So you didn't get confirmed.
No, I didn't. I got a hold of what the church that I went to called the Devil's Books, and they were just like books that kind of brought up contradictions in the Bible. And then I read through the entire Bible at like 12 or 13 and started asking people at church about it because I was like just literally looking to understand the religion that I was part of. And when I was met with sort of disciplinary action and threats to be limited from going to church camp and stuff like that, I was like, this doesn't make any sense to me. Like, why wouldn't, like, I'm not even looking to, like, follow anything about Satan or anything like that. Like, I'm just literally trying to understand why, if God is, the Almighty, why he would contradict himself in his own book. That doesn't make sense.
Hmm.
And so their response was to just like push me farther and farther away, which only made me question more. And once I had opened Pandora's box in terms of religion, that started making me question the other conservative beliefs that I was being taught that were clearly connected to religion. And 15 years later, I was a communist. So.
Well, I mean, yeah, I had a similar experience. I sometimes wonder, because I went to Catholic school, and so as the years went by, I mean, we would have to go to religion class and things like that. And
Yeah.
as the years went by, like I started having more and more questions just about all of it. And the answers just sounded more and more absurd to the point where you would kind of look at these I would look at my teachers and I would be like, this is frightening that you're a grown adult and you're peddling this bullshit. And I think by the time I was in like 10th grade, I don't think I was like a full-fledged like I think I was one of those people where I was just like, I think there's a supreme being out there because it's been shoved like drilled into my head so hard. I'm not ready to go there yet, but I'm against organized religion. Like I think it's a bad idea. That was where I was at by like, 13 or whatever. And then by like college, I was like, look, there's probably not a god out there, and if there is some supreme being, it's certainly not any of this man-made stuff. It's just not a thing. So, which by definition is either an atheist or an agnostic, depending on how people want to define their terms. But so
Hmm.
I don't get too caught up in those weeds. People can call me what they want, but it's
Yeah.
one of those. It's in that family.
Yeah, that I mean, it was a very similar trajectory for me. I mean, I guess I would refer to myself as an agnostic atheist
Mm,
because Gnostic simply means know or don't know. And I mean, humans are pretty limited right now in what we can know, but from
hmm.
all available evidence, I don't see any evidence that there is any sort of supreme being. So I would also refer to myself as an atheist. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
it depends on how people, because some people define it. I mean, by the literal definition, I mean, from what you just said and from what I just said, we are both atheists by the literal definition, because it just means a theist without a god, which is both of us. But I mean, some people define atheism as you believe it. And I don't really believe it or not believe it. I'm just like, I don't think there's a God. There's no evidence of a God existing. I certainly don't believe in any of the man made gods. So, like, but maybe there is something beyond us out there, which I think like veers into the agnostic, area. But I think there also is, I guess, if I'm being totally self-reflective, I do take a little bit of comfort in the belief that none of those man-made gods exist.
Oh, agreed.
So
Absolutely.
so I guess maybe that makes me an atheist. I don't
I mean,
know.
depends on how you define it, like you said. Yeah, the only plausible suggestion for a sort of quote unquote God that would make sense to me is the theories proposed by Spinoza.
Mm,
And that's that everything and nothing is God. And, like,
mhm.
I mean, I could see that being true. I don't see a lot of evidence for that. It seems more like playing with semantics to me. But, if there is a plausible definition in which I could see the term of God making sense, then I think I still have to define myself as agnostic atheist. But you know, I don't know. All I know is that we have the scientific method, and if you can't repeat results via via experiments and observation and whatnot, you can't depend on it being real. So, you know,
Hmm.
like I think I definitely identify as much with the atheist side as the agnostic side. If
Hmm.
that makes any sense.
No, it makes a lot of sense, and I really do think like words are important, and the way we like dissect this stuff actually really does matter. That's why when people make comments like "I don't believe in climate change," it boils my blood for many reasons. One, because I mean, look around,
Yeah.
and two, because you don't get to believe or not believe in it. It's science. Belief is not required here. That's what makes it science. It's based on exploration. It's based on trial and error. It's based on, you can reject it should you choose to. You can say the data is bad or whatever else, but you can't not believe in it. That belief doesn't play into the arena here. That's not how it works. That's just
Yeah.
not how it works.
No,
You
I
you
couldn't
could believe,
agree
but
more.
there are certain things that I do think kind of blur the lines a little bit. Something like karma, for instance. Like, I think to an extent there's something to be said that like we know cause and effect is a thing. And I do think I am a believer, I guess you could say, that you kind of get back what you put out into the world. If you put out a lot of negativity into the world, it finds you. If you try to do good, usually good to an extent finds you. It's not a foolproof thing, obviously, but I do think that's a real thing. And even though there's not like it's not like that's scientifically proven, but it kind of, I don't know, it's a little blurred. I think that's a little bit blurred. Like just karma is like a little blurry because cause and effect is something that we have scientifically proven.
Yeah.
So
I mean, if you go around treating everybody horribly, then a lot of people are going to not like you and not really have a lot of incentive to treat you well. So
right.
I think that pretty much explains. I agree with you that a lot of times bad things happen to bad people, and you know, and I think that's explainable simply because they've gone around treating everyone like shit. You
No,
know,
I feel you.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's never, if somebody's treating like, you know, day-to-day people like shit, they're also treating family like shit. And, you know, I mean, people aren't going to want to hang around. So bad things happen to those people and they get left alone, which is good.
So
So,
what got you into Marx? When did you find your way to Marx?
well, man, that's a good question. I guess the first introduction I had to Marx was in college. I was homeless and like couch surfing, and
Where'd you go?
I was in Texas. It was actually I went to school in Texas for a bit, and I had gone back home,
Where was home at the time?
Minnesota.
So how'd you wind up in Texas?
I wanted to experience warmer weather, and
Okay.
also I was wanting to learn Chinese. I had learned like five other languages at that point, most of which I've forgotten by now. But I was wanting to learn Chinese because I was fascinated with Chinese culture and Chinese characters. And this random school in Texas had a really solid Chinese program. So I was home for like maybe a month to a month and a half over the summer, and it got so bad at home that I decided to get out as early as possible, even though the dorms weren't even open yet at my school. And so a friendly comrade allowed me to stay at their place, and they showed me the Communist Manifesto. And at that point, I had only heard like, I didn't know who Marx was. I didn't know who Lenin was, nothing. I'd only heard that these are like really evil and you're even evil for reading their material. So I was like kind of scared when this comrade showed me the Communist Manifesto, but they read it aloud to me and I identified with several of the themes in it. So I was like, huh, that's kind of food for thought. I'll need to come back to this later. And then I don't think I returned to Marx for another 5 or 6 years until after I had lived in China and tried to make sense of how different society is there in terms of like people care about each other more. the government actually does stuff to improve people's lives. There's technological advancements there, and it doesn't displace workers on the same scale that it does here, or I mean, in the United States. And I was trying to make sense of that. And then I learned that it was governed by the CPC, the Chinese Communist Party. And, I wanted to learn more about this system that made the society work so well. I mean, when I was there, I was only there 2 years, and I saw an entire subway line put down a major road in my city. And instead of tearing down a basilica, a Catholic basilica that was in the way, they upgraded the basilica and like redid it so that it was like freshly remodeled. And then the subway passed right by it. So churchgoers could just get off the subway and go to this church. And I was like, in the US, they would have just plowed right through, like, and it would have taken 25 years.
They'd still be working on it.
Yeah, it never would have even been done. So like it was just mind-boggling to me to see this happen so fast. And road construction was the same way. Like where I'm from in Minnesota, it's like a running joke that there's construction season and then winter. Yeah, that's not how it works in China. Like, of course, there's constant construction, but like any city, but it's done fast. Like they would come in and fix an intersection in a week and have traffic back on that road working functionally. And these are like highways, these are massive intersections. And, that was not a thing where I was from. So I wanted to make sense of this. And so I found David Harvey's walkthrough of Capital Volume 1 on YouTube, and it's free. I recommend it to anybody who's looking to understand, because I'm not an economist. I tried to read Volume Capital 1 and it was just going over my head. But David Harvey is an excellent professor, and he's the sort of guy that can like sum up a page of Marx in like a sentence and you understand. And once I understood that capitalism just didn't work mathematically and there's no way around that formula, once I understood law of capital centralization and how it accumulates, I could not deny that that was correct, and that it confirmed everything that I had ever observed in the differences between the United States and China. So that was when I finally had to say, like, okay, I'm a communist, and this is true, And it's been, I've expanded my knowledge since then to reading like Lenin, Mao. I've watched Sankara's speeches, Ho Chi Minh's letters, and it's just further made sense to me the more time goes on. So